Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 209 of the Juicebox Podcast. Today's episode is called Leah is Good, and it is sponsored by Realgood Foods, Omnipod, Dexcom, and Dancing for Diabetes. You should go to dexcom.com/juicebox to learn more about the Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitor. When you're at realgoodfoods.com, use the offer code JUICEBOX to save 20% on your entire order. You heard me right, 20%. You can visit dancingfordiabetes.com or check them out on Facebook and Instagram to see what they're doing. And of course, if you'd like a free, no-obligation demo of the Omnipod sent directly to your door, go to myomnipod.com/juicebox. And now, on to the show.
It's so weird to talk to you, I have to say. I've been listening to your voice for like 6 months, so it's very exciting.
I appreciate you being excited. There's no reason to be excited. In this episode of the podcast, we're going to be speaking with Leah, who has had type 1 diabetes for a very long time, and she also has a child with type 1. I want to remind you that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise, and to always consult a physician before making changes to your medical plan. Programming note, beginning next week, I'll be running a series of conversations with Jenny Smith. She's the CDE who's been on a couple of times. You guys love her. I love her. And we are going to be talking about being bold with insulin. Soup to nuts. What's that mean? From MDI to temp basals and everything in between. You're going to get all the concepts that are spoken about spread out over all these episodes in super targeted, shorter, consumable, shareable, revisitable episodes of the podcast. You're going to love it.
My name is Leah. I am a wife, a mom of 2. I am a nurse, and I have type 1 diabetes. And my son, Mason, also has type 1 diabetes.
Leah, how old were you when you were diagnosed?
I was 16 years old the summer before my senior year, and that was in 1991.
I see. 2001 and 17.
Oh, 1991.
Was that 20? Was it 20?
27 years ago.
I was so close to it, and then you kind of cut me off, but it's fine. So, I don't know if you saw what I did there. I went 91 to 2001, and right away I put 10.
Oh, I see. You were doing the math.
Yeah. I put 10 years right in the bank, and then I counted from 1 to 18. I got 17. Then I added the 10 and the 17 together, and then I was about to come up with 27. But that's a very long time to have diabetes. Yeah,
it's been most of my life.
Yeah. Does it genuinely feel like that?
It does. Yes. It's hard to remember a time before. I mean, I do remember it because I was 16, but most of my life I feel like I've had diabetes.
Well, great fun. So was there any indication that you might get diabetes? People in your family?
No.
Nothing like that?
At the time, it was a big surprise. I had never known anyone with type 1. I knew what it was, but I didn't have anyone in my family. I thought it was just a fluke that I just got lucky. And but then it turns out that there is some autoimmune history in my family. A lot of my aunts have hypothyroid. And then later on, some other people were diagnosed with other autoimmune diseases.
When you think about it, other autoimmune diseases in your family history, just on the female side or male and female? Just a brief reminder that at some point today, you should visit dancingfordiabetes.com. Dancing, the number 4, diabetes.com.
Both.
Okay. So, yeah, they were getting around to diabetes. It was coming, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Later on, my cousin's child was also diagnosed with type 1. And, then my son was diagnosed last year.
Okay. How's your thyroid holding up?
I have hypothyroid. Yeah, I've had it for about 20 years.
Okay. All right. So, all right. I think we understand where we're at.
Yeah.
So 16 years old at almost 30 years ago, you were just needles and a meter?
Yes. I had a big meter with big drops of blood. It was a one touch. And I had a big kit. and I did needles with regular insulin and NPH, and you combine them into the syringe and gave yourself an injection that way.
Were they disposable syringes then?
Yes.
They were. Okay. Well, hold on a second. Arden's blood sugar is trying to creep up on me. She is in her first couple of weeks of high school. And, is it trying to move? She's in her first couple of weeks of high school. She started off all strong the first day. She's like, I'm going to buy lunch this year. And I was like, okay. And she came home the first day and she goes, I'm not buying lunch anymore. That was after I put like $50 in her account. So I'm like, okay. I've been figuring out her time of day. She's been getting her blood sugar is trying to go up in the early morning, which it didn't do last year. So we've been bolusing a little bit. I did a really a fun bolus today because she was 96 right before, about 8-10 minutes before lunch. And so I did a 12.5 unit bolus, but I did it extended and I did 0% up front and the entire balance over a half an hour. And so I got a little more of a dip. It held, and now it's at 121, and it says it's stable, but the Dexcom line's giving me the indication that maybe it wants to go up.
Yeah, it's creeping up.
I think it's trying, but I'm going to give it 5 more minutes before I bolus again. So, and it's been about an hour since we did the extended, so the whole bolus has been in for about a half an hour. Anyway, I'm sorry. I'm just going to be keeping half an eye on that as we go.
No, I do the same thing all the day with my son.
Well, how did that... So wait. So first of all, we have to get you up to the present day. So you started with your needles and your NPH and your regular. That went on for how long, do you think?
Well, I was until the pen came out, and then Lantus came out about 2001, I think, and I switched to Lantus and Humalog, and I did pens until my son's diagnosis. I never had a pump.
Wow. Okay. So you were 10 years regular and NPH, and then you went the next 16 years. My math is on point today. And you did the next 16 years still MDI. And how was that going for you as far as your day to day? Like, did you have it down? Did you know what you like?
Yeah. So I pretty quickly, when I got diabetes, I was in the hospital for a week, and I hated it. It was not fun at all. And I never wanted to be there again. And I quickly figured out what I needed to do to take care of my body. And I quickly figured out how to do it by feeling and not really going by a carb ratio. And I'd go to the endo and they'd say, what's your carb ratio? And I just kind of guess what I thought it was. But I was like, okay, I know what a sandwich would be. I know what, an apple would be. I just knew myself. How many
units would cover this food?
Yes.
And was your knowing based on how you felt after you ate, or were you testing after you ate?
I tested a lot, but I also felt it. And anytime I'm over like 140, I feel it. Mm-hmm. And if I'm under 60, I feel it. So I just went along, took care of myself. Everything was going good. Every time I went to my appointments, they say, oh, your numbers look great. Keep doing what you're doing. So that's what I did. And, as soon as I became a nurse, I would go to the doctors and they would just kind of assume that I knew everything.
Yeah.
But at the time, there wasn't a lot of changes going on. And so I wasn't seeking out information. I just was doing what worked.
Okay.
And, I was offered a pump, but all they would say is, hey, do you want a pump? And I would say, no, I don't want one. I'm good. Everything's going well. I'm good how I am.
Can I ask you, did you not want a pump because just things were going so well, you didn't feel like you needed to change?
No, this sounds kind of silly, but I did not want a pump because I didn't think it was sexy.
Ah, gotcha. I do everything based on how sexy I feel. That's not even true at all.
I don't know. Sorry, I don't feel the same way now at all.
Okay.
But
that was your reasoning back then. I
couldn't figure out what I would do with this tubing and like a pager looking thing hanging out of me. I just didn't know how that would work on me.
It's funny as you and I are talking September of 2018, and I recognize that this probably won't go up for like 3 months. I can picture myself now humming Bringing Sexy Back as I insert the Omnipod ad right here. Arden's been using an Omnipod every day for almost 11 years. And just this morning, I was thinking about the first time that I saw an Omnipod. It was at a pump training class at our local children's hospital. I made the decision that day based on very little information. I'm not going to lie to you. I saw that it was tubeless. I saw that it seemed innovative. It was thinking different than the other pumps in the room, a lot of which, by the way, are out of business now. But I remember, and I feel proud about this, looking at the Omnipod and thinking, when they change this pump, when they improve it, when they upgrade it, I'm just going to get the improvements because it's self-contained. I was excited that my daughter wouldn't have to have something attached to her by tubing. I mean, that was probably my first thought. But then just the idea of innovation, being able to move forward quickly, being agile as a company, as a product, that excited me. And 11 years later, I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that I made the absolute correct choice that day. And if you check out the Omnipod and decide you like it, today will be that day for you. The great news is it's simple. All you have to do is go to myomnipod.com/juicebox and request a free, no obligation demo of the Omnipod. That gets you started. Then if you like it, you reach back out and tell them, I want to move forward. I want to be untethered. I want to wear an Omnipod like Arden. It's that easy. myomnipod.com/juicebox. Oh, we are going to bolus Arden, and then we're going to get back to your feelings. Hold on one second.
Sounds
she
good.
Went from 121 to 127, and so I am going to assume that it's going to try to keep climbing. I'm going to say, hey. She's probably going to say, hi. Oh, she did. And I'm going to say 1 unit, and I got the K back, the teen answer to everything on text. First of all, I want to say that I think that that's a completely reasonable thought. Like, just to say, this really isn't sexy. Like, I don't want you trying to feel feminine or just like a person, and you don't want something slapped you. I will tell you right away that the first time someone indicated to us that pumps were a thing, I thought, I don't want something stuck to my daughter. Like, I didn't think she wasn't going to look sexy because she was 4, but right. I definitely just thought this is going to alter reality in a way that it can't be good, is what I thought. Like, I thought this just can't be good. But you get to this point, or at least I did, where you realize you can't judge everything based on before diabetes, right? Like, you have type 1 diabetes now. Everything needs to be judged in that lens. You can't hold up the idea of, but I don't want this in my life, because honestly, you don't get to make decisions like that. And we all get caught up in that sort of like false feeling that things are going the way we want them to, and if they don't, we change them. And most things are like that, right? If you don't like the paint in your living room, you might change the color. But your descent or ride to the end of your life is going to go about the way it's going to go. Some people get type 1 diabetes when they're 16. Some people get type 2 diabetes when they're 60, and all other ages. Some people get, some people fall off a ladder cleaning out their gutters. As that person's falling, my gut is they think, oh crap, and I can't believe this is how I'm going to die. Because no one thinks they're going to fall off a ladder, and no one thinks they're getting diabetes. But it doesn't stop us from judging. It doesn't stop us from judging what's happening to us now against what we wanted to happen. It's just very human, I guess. So I think you had a very reasonable reaction, and you stuck to it. You stuck to your guns.
I did. Yeah. Even through like my 2 pregnancies, Lantus wasn't approved when I was pregnant to use. So I had to go back to NPH, and I did it around the clock. I had to do NPH injections every 6 hours on top of the Humalog I was taking. So I did it like for 2 years because I had my kids. They're 15 months apart. So yeah.
What are those called? Irish twins?
Oh, not quite.
Not quite?
Less than a year.
Less than a year makes them Irish twins? Gotcha.
And the thing is, I was open to having a pump if I couldn't manage it the way I was. I wasn't like...
But you were.
Yeah. It was going well, and I just...
What was... I was going to say, what was considered a good A1C back then? What was the ADA saying back then? Was it 7.5 at that point? Do you remember?
I don't even know, because mine was always in the low 6s.
Oh, so you just were like, I'm killing this, and it doesn't...
I just was, I did what I needed to do. I didn't think about it. I just, I took care of myself, but I didn't think about diabetes all that much. And I didn't know anyone with diabetes. So I just kind of did it without thinking about it.
Yeah, you were just like an island unto yourself, like just by yourself and handling it, and a low A1C, eating a fairly regular, what people would consider a normal diet.
Oh, yeah. I just figured out, like, if I was going to eat a high carb, that I had to take a boatload of insulin.
Yeah.
And I still do that. I eat low carb now, because both my kids have celiac disease too. Okay. So we don't have a lot of... I know. It's all... You
okay? You want to go cry for a minute and come back and we can keep doing this? No, you're okay.
No, I'm actually good.
Well, see, you're
really good. Yeah.
You're a great example, right? Because look what you've said in the first couple of minutes. I got type 1 diabetes when I'm 16. My kid got it last year. My niece or nephew has it. I have hypothyroidism. My kids are celiac, and I'm good. Like
it's a amazing perspective, and it's the way you view things. Because I am a nurse and I work in a cancer center, and I see a lot of really rare things and terminal patients, and so I have a different perspective, I think, than most people. That to me, it doesn't feel that bad. Diabetes does not feel that bad. And I've always felt that way. And I've said that, and I don't know what to say. It just, maybe I feel like I'm lucky that I've been able to control it as I have, and I don't know why.
Well, also, it occurs to me as you're talking that you don't have a preconceived notion of what good means. Just, I think being alive is good, right? And having a family and living your life.
Oh, yeah.
That's the good part, right?
Absolutely.
I hear you. I really do. I think perspective is everything, to be perfectly honest. Like even down to the things that, I don't know how much people would believe or not believe that most of the correspondence I get back is, hey, I heard what you're saying on the podcast about stuff and it's great. But every once in a while I hear from somebody who is just really, they don't get it. Like it didn't click with them, or it didn't work with them, or whatever. And then that not clicking for some people turns directly to anger. I did what I heard people saying and it didn't work, and angry. Like right away. And I always think, well, let's try again. Or did it get any better? Or like, did you see any improvement? Did anything about this? Like, but no, right away and I think that's their perspective too. And I don't know that you can, I'm going to use an example from somebody who I know will never hear this, but Arden just started on a new softball team not too long ago. And there's one girl on the team who just seems pissed all the time. There's no other real way to put it. She just seems angry constantly. And then one day, one of her parents shows up, and her parent is disabled to the point where they're riding a scooter around the game. And I tried to strike up a conversation with the parent, and she was 3 times as angry as the kid. Mm-hmm. And I thought, what chance does this little girl have of not being angry? Her mom is obviously upset about something. She doesn't try to hide it, and this girl's taking on that kind of, like, she's taking on the mantle of the family. Like, this is what we do. We're mad. And maybe it's completely reasonable that they're angry. I don't know the rest of their story, but I also know that I've met people, like you said, in far worse situations who are not like that. And so there is, to some degree, you have to say in there was a moment when someone decided, this is too much for me, I can't handle this, or I just don't want to, or this wasn't the rose garden I was promised, and so because of that, I'm going to be pissed. And I don't know that I completely, well, not completely, I wouldn't judge anybody for that happening to them. Like, I think we all have a tipping point, and just some people's might be a little more, their resolve might be a little stronger than other people for a number of reasons. But I love your attitude, and I think that was amazing. It's a long way of saying I loved your answer when you said, no, I'm good. If you've been searching for low-carb, high-protein snacks that are made from real ingredients, look no further. And bonus, if you're the kind of person who likes saving 20%, well, I've got a deal for you. You need to go to realgoodfoods.com. And when you check out, use the offer code Juicebox to save that 20%. There's also free shipping, but that's not the best part. The best part comes when you open your oven and smell those amazing snacks. Just the other night, I had the jalapeno and white cheddar poppers. They also have artichoke and cheese and pepperoni and mozzarella, but let me tell you a little more about the poppers. They're chicken poppers, delicious chicken filled with natural ingredients. My wife, she leans towards the enchiladas. That's pretty much her favorite thing at Real Good Foods. Kelly loves the chicken enchiladas, the beef enchiladas, and she's getting ready to try the pork. Arden says the cheese are her favorite. Now, my mom loves the cauliflower crust pizza. You can get cauliflower vegetable, pepperoni, margarita, or just cheese. So satisfy your low-carb desires and your high-level taste all in the same place. RealGoodFoods.com. And don't forget that when you finish your shopping, before you place your order, to use the offer code JUICEBOX to save 20% off the entire order. And Real Good Foods will even throw in free shipping. And I have to tell you something. Their shipping is crazy amazing. It was the one thing I was concerned about ordering food and having it delivered to my house like that, food that's supposed to be frozen. I just had this concern it would show up and be warm, but just the opposite. The person who devised this shipping plan is a genius. Smart as the guy who made the poppers. If you didn't have a pump for all that time, what made you get a pump?
As soon as my son was diagnosed that night at the hospital, it just clicked in my head. I was like, he's getting a pump, he's getting the Omnipod, and I am too, and we're doing it right away. And I don't know why that thought was very firmly in my brain, that I had seen the Omnipod at, we had teaching at work, and I had seen it, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. I'd never seen a tubeless pump before, and so we didn't go to the class. I just went to the first endo appointment and said, we want the Omnipod, and I messaged my endocrinologist and said, I want to get one, and so within a month we got a Omnipod and the Dexcom.
Right at the same time?
Yeah, we both did within a week. I got mine first, and he was super bummed. And then, we went in a week later, and they were like, "Well, we got to do the saline trial." And I was like, "No, we're going for it.
We're all good here." Yeah, I've had diabetes for most of existence. I think I can figure this out. You know what's so funny is that your answer about why did I finally, after all those years, go to a pump, it mirrors almost exactly every parent I've ever had on who has type 1, whose kids are later diagnosed. Going back to just last week, if anybody heard Lori last week in episode 189, right? It's love. It really it becomes parental love at some point. It's I want to do. I was okay. I don't know what the standard of care is, right? Whatever you say, whatever in your mind the gold standard is. But if I didn't think, as a person living with type 1, if I didn't think I was right up to that standard, it was okay because it was me. And then the minute I bring my child into it, I need to push up against that ceiling and further because I need better for them. It is, it's incredibly interesting. I hope people hear that story enough to realize that even if you don't have a kid with type 1 diabetes, if you have type 1 and you're an adult, you should want the gold standard, whatever that is. I'm not telling you
that's true.
I'm just saying want that for yourself because, and I haven't said this in a long time, so it bears repeating now that we are up to almost 200 episodes. You don't want to be the person 10 years from now who looks at what everyone else is doing and says, oh, I didn't realize that the entire landscape of diabetes management has shifted and I did not go along with it. If you stop and think, right, would you today be in such a good place if you were still on regular and MPH and didn't have a pump and didn't have a CGM?
No.
And so when things improve, and I'm not saying just change because they change, if you love your pump and somebody else comes out with a pump that has a funky color on it, I'm not saying change because, hey, that one's cool. But I mean, when things make a leap you sort of have to leap along with it or you'll get left behind. And that means you're leaving your health behind, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's how I handle it for Arden.
It was a huge learning curve to transition though, because again, they were like, Mom has type 1 diabetes. You're a nurse, so here's your pump. And I initially treated it like I did injections by just bolusing and not using it to get the most out of it. And once I learned from you how to do extended boluses and temp basals, it changed things for both of us so much and made us so much more stable and in control of things. It's been amazing.
I'm very happy for you. That's excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You just don't want to be, it's a bazooka. You don't kill a fly with a bazooka. It does all this great stuff. If you just want to kill the fly, just get a fly swatter. And so, so it's fine. Like you have a pump. It's not just a way to not inject so many times, which I think is how doctors sell it to people.
Yep.
And for whatever reason, but maybe because they don't understand and maybe because they're just trying to tease you into, to doing it. But it's such a short changing. It's just to think of a pump as just a way to get less injections is as insulting as it is to say that a Dexcom's an alarm to keep you from dying. It's just such a minimal concept. Like there's so much more to it than that. And easy to understand if someone can just explain it to you once. Like it doesn't take a lifetime to figure out. It's pretty simple. And so it's so cool that you did that. It's very nice that you had kind of like Mason's situation to kind of propel you that way. Can you tell me a little bit about his diagnosis?
It wasn't on my radar that one of my children might get type 1. I never, ever considered it at all. And then within like a week, I noticed he was going to the bathroom at night and drinking a lot. It was really hot summer. So I kind of mentioned it to my husband and he was like, oh, yeah. And then I smelled his breath and I smelled that metallic smell. And then one night I just decided to go test him while he was sleeping. And I just knew, and it was off my meter, his number. And I just knew. I had known, yeah.
Can I ask you how it struck you? Were you upset? Did you cry? Did you get just resolved? Like, how did it hit you initially?
That I was right, that I knew.
Yeah, you were like, damn it, I figured this out. That's excellent.
It just was like, oh, all this stuff. And, I look back on the previous month and the other things that had been going on, little things here and there, that it all made sense. And I mean, people have asked me if I was devastated, and it really wasn't. It was like, I was grateful that I was able to share it with him. I knew what it was and that we could do this. It would have been different probably if it was anything else. And honestly, like the celiac diagnosis kind of threw me more for a loop because I wasn't aware of that at all. I had never been tested for it. So I was kind of like, what? But it was a hard time initially with his diagnosis. And we went to the hospital right away that night. And then we were discharged in the morning and had the education for a few hours on no sleep and got home. And I had that paper where they tell you what to give. And I was like, I need to follow this, even though I knew everything.
That's funny.
I wanted a guide.
Right.
I wasn't in it.
Interesting.
Yeah. So it took me like a few months and I knew things like they were just out of control. He was up and down and I was like, I know this can be better. I can see my lines here. I know how to do this. So I just have to figure it out for him. And it took me for a little while, but boy, has it changed a lot. And the Dexcom and the Omnipod are just like the things that did it, really.
It's pretty cool. So I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
When you win a board game, are you one of those people who gets up and yells like when you're like it's the maid in the pantry with a candlestick and it's right, you just stand up and like I knew it. Do you like being right? Because that's such a first of all, your response says one, you've had diabetes for so long that you were like, well, I can do this. Like that's not a big deal. The diabetes part's not a big deal from your perspective. You were I love that you were like, I won. I figured this out by myself. You were like Sherlock Holmes in that moment. You know, just explaining to the whole room on the Orient Express how you figured out the whole thing. I've blended 9 different metaphors together there, and so, but it's really funny. And then, so you know, into the hospital and right back out again. You fall into this really interesting category that's come up a couple of times in the podcast too, when there are medical people on, which is other medical people don't explain things to you because they just imagine you understand them already. Completely. Is that frustrating?
Well, I find now that I do know a lot more in this area with regards to diabetes, but it is because I have to kind of take over and figure it out myself. So
and that's
it is
what you
frustrating.
did. And that's what you did when you saw him going up and down, especially when you were staying stable, right? Like you had stability and he didn't. Right. Mm-hmm. So I knew it was possible. Yeah. Oh, please. You're everybody has their own M&M story, which which I've talked about here before. Somebody explained to me that it was a nurse practitioner who told me they had a patient who used the Dexcom to figure out how to eat M&Ms without a spike.
Yeah.
And when I heard that, I think she was telling me a story about, look, you can eat candy. And what I was hearing was a story about there's a way to balance insulin and timing so that your blood sugar doesn't move. And that to me was like, that was it. Now some people will tell me, like there's a blog post on my website about eating like French toast or Chinese food. And people speak to me about that. And I think to myself, oh, that's their M&M story. That's the moment they realized this is possible. Right. And so you actually had your own experience that you were able to say, look, I know this is possible because I do this for myself.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
What were the steps you took? Like, how did you kind of hammer your way through it with your son?
I was seeking out how to do this. And his endocrinologist was saying, oh no, he's doing great. And I was like, no, this can be better. For me, I know that this can be better. And I would talk to like the school nurse and she'd say, oh yeah, this is normal. And I was still like, no. So, I mean, thank goodness I found your podcast. I started listening. I started taking into practice some of the ideas that you were talking about and started figuring it out, how insulin reacted in his body to different foods and different times and different situations. And then started texting with him and gave him some freedom to be away from me and be able to do things on his own with my help. And that's how very quickly, like within 6 months, his A1C went from 6.7 to 5.4.
Wow. You were already doing well. And then, that's by the way, you're one of the people who, listen, I don't want to dissuade anybody, but I'm doing my best to keep up with all the messages, and I love talking to everybody. But Leah, you're one of the people that, like, as I've gotten your messages through the months, I can see your momentum building. Like you, do you know what I mean by that? Like you kind of, like I see you hit a little thing, then you kind of go past it, and it's so like heartwarming to look at from my perspective. Please, no one think that if I answer you back in a short way that I'm not just like, oh my God, this is amazing. But you're not the only one sending a message. But at the same time, I love seeing it because yours was to your point, very quick. I thought, like you really like ascended that hill quickly. It was really cool to see. It was just genuinely, I don't know, like it reinforced for me what I was doing. You were helping me. You didn't probably realize it at the time, but you gave me confidence about what I was doing when I was seeing what was happening for you. So thank you.
Thank you too. Yeah.
It really is. It's, I mean, I said heartwarming already, but it's beyond that. It's just sometimes I need the confidence too, because, it doesn't work for everybody. There are some people who listen to this podcast and they leave too early or it doesn't strike them the right way. Or some people tell me, I wish you would, I wish that the episodes were more directional, and I don't know how to explain to them that like my brain doesn't really work that way. Like this is the best I can offer, so I feel like I let people down sometimes, but it was really nice to see what happened to you and your son.
Yeah. And it's not to say that it's not a struggle to do this. It's very challenging. I don't sleep. I mean, between his beeping and my beeping, there's a lot of interrupted nights, but I really try to take it on with no fear. And I lived my life with no fear. Nobody ever taught me fear around diabetes when I was diagnosed. And so I didn't hold that. And I see a lot of comments and posts on social media now about fear and challenges. And I think everyone's experience is different, but I've found a lot of value in having confidence in my ability to manage myself and my son.
Good for you. Because there's something that happens in social media to that point. So some people are just afraid, and right on, there's plenty to be afraid of, right? So I get that. But I think there's also plenty of people trying to build presences on social media, and they do it sometimes by attracting people in with the fear, like leading statements, like like when your kid falls, you don't say, "Oh my God, you're hurt, come here." You don't do that, because then you put them in the mindset that they're hurt, like right. That you don't act shocked when they fall over because it shocks them, and
right, the reaction,
and you don't ask them a leading question, where does it hurt? Because then they'll be like, well, you know what, come to think of it. And, you can lead people to that direction. And I think on social media, sometimes people will sort of do that. They'll kind of pluck at heartstrings to get people to follow and like and things like that. And I'm much more in the idea of put out positive stuff that works, and let people find it and come to it as they will. There's no reason to try to force somebody into it. You can't do that, and you shouldn't try to do that because they're not ready. I have a number of emails that start off with, your podcast is unrealistic and this doesn't work and blah, blah, blah. And, they're this close to being like, go to hell. And then 3 months later, it's like, I kept listening and, I'm sorry for the first email. And I'm just like, hey, it's funny. All right on, whatever, know. But it's understandable because they just weren't in the right space when the information hit them the first time.
Yeah. Well, I've been in that space. And it's funny, when I first found your podcast, I went to my husband and I told him, oh, you should listen to this podcast with me. He's saying this and this. And he's like, honey, I've been telling you this for 3 months now. You didn't hear me. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
He was just probably used to not being listened to and really didn't know a way to fight through it.
It was just being ready to take the information in, being ready. Yeah.
I looked at my family the other day in my private life and I said, 4 words. And they're looking right at me and I'm like, no one listens to me. And then they just turned around and walked away. I was like, see, you're not listening now. I make sense sometimes, Then I'm like babbling. We're outside in the parking lot. I'm like, there are people online who listen to me. And my wife's like, they don't know you. And I'm like, oh, well, that's not the point. Anyway, in your own home, no one listens to you. But you're 100% right. It's such a great example too. He's standing there telling you something that just 3 months later, you're going to be like, hey, eureka. And while he's going, I've been saying this for 90 days in a row. And you just weren't ready to hear it. Like, it's just that's very common, Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But the point is, and the point has to be to everyone listening, is that this diabetes thing, it's got its own life cycle, right? And you right now, whether you're listening to the podcast or following some Facebook group or you're on Instagram or wherever you're at trying to find your community, right now that place feels like the whole world. And it's got names and avatars that you recognize. And what you need to understand is that 6 months from now, on average, you won't be there anymore, and either will those people. It's a very few that stay behind and do this sort of thing. this podcast and some really great blogs and stuff like that. Most people go through this process and then they leave. And that is the best part. I've said it a million times. I'll say it again right here. When your name disappears out of my messages, when your face no longer strikes a chord with me when I see it in an avatar, that means you're off living your life somewhere. And then everything I tried to do, if you were listening to me and you got anything out of it, like, that's a success. It's hard for you to imagine right now, because we do correspond, that right. One day you just won't think to ever talk to me again. And that'll be a great day for you. It really will be.
Yes, I'm still in the process of figuring things out, I feel like.
Of course. It takes forever. Like the big pieces for you fell into place, like you said, pretty quickly over a number of months. But still, now that you're using kind of bigger ideas, the experience, the ability to have those experiences are going to be fewer and farther between. And so it's going to take you longer for this thing to come up this time and that time and this time. I screwed up today. When I saw the bend in Arden's Dexcom line, I should have bolused then. And I didn't, because her blood sugar's 140. It's going to go back down again on that last bolus that you heard me give her. But I could have stopped the 140 with less insulin a half an hour before. And I just, well, you know what was going on. My dogs were not behaving, and I was trying to start the podcast. And there was a lot of stuff going on. But in that moment, right then and there, had I put a half a unit in, just a half a unit, then she would have leveled off, I'm thinking more like 110. And instead now 140. And you think, well, that's not bad. And I don't think it's bad. I really want to be clear about that. I don't think my daughter's blood sugar being 140 90 minutes after I bolused for lunch while she was at school, by the way, with a banana, grapes, a half of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, a grab bag of Cheetos, a juice bag that does have some sugar in it, something else. Oh, let me see if I say this to you, if you know what I'm talking about. My daughter did this to me the other day. Arden told me. One of those cookies. When I say one of those cookies, does anything pop into your head?
I guess an Oreo.
Okay. So apparently around here, when the kids say one of those cookies to each other, they mean those cookies that are about 4 inches around and have this big swath of icing over top of them. You usually buy them at a place like Costco. They vaguely taste like cookies. They're always served at birthday parties. You're all nodding along at home now if you've ever seen them before. My daughter says when she says to somebody, hey, I'm going to have one of those cookies, they actually know what everyone's talking about.
Oh, my goodness.
They're not food. I think they have like 36 grams of carbs in them, like for one. And it's got to be poison. I'm 100% sure. So think about it. A banana of varying size. I don't remember how big it was. A half of a sandwich with jelly and peanut butter and a piece of bread. One of those cookies. A grab bag of Cheetos. A handful of grapes. I don't know how many. A juice box that I think has 8 carbs in it. And something else. And I didn't count the carbs. I just gave her this insulin. And had I reacted when I knew to react, everything would have went perfectly. And still, a complete and utter failure is 140 blood sugar that's stable. Honestly, this is the perfect time to talk about the Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitor. You just heard that story about Arden's meal, all those foods, not even having to count carbs, just putting in the insulin, following the trends, taking care of business. That is all possible because of the Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitor. The ad should stop here. I'm just telling you, just go get it. Dexcom.com/juicebox. End the music. Go do it. But I know you might need some more convincing. So I'm going to tell you a story. I met someone recently who has had diabetes for 21 years. And even though they had a Dexcom, they weren't thinking about the data correctly. So their blood sugars were jumping all over the place. And they could see it. It was driving them crazy. 60, 400, 60, 400 all day long. This person and I spoke for about a half an hour. I showed them how to interpret the data coming back from their glucose monitor. And the very next day, my hand to God, the very next day, this person sent me back a 24-hour graph that was so flat and beautiful, without spikes or lows. It just warmed my heart in a way that you can't imagine. Maybe you can imagine. I was so thrilled for her. How did she make those decisions? With the information coming back to her with her Dexcom G6 continuous glucose monitor. And you can do that too. by going to dexcom.com/juicebox. Those links are also available at juiceboxpodcast.com and in the show notes of your podcast player. Get yourself a G6, get yourself a flat graph. These are my results. Yours may vary. Once you have your Dexcom, you'll have all this extra free time you won't be spending paying attention to your blood sugar. You know what you do with that time? You go to dancingfordiabetes.com, dancing4diabetes.com. Then you check them out on Facebook and on Instagram, and it makes you feel warm and fuzzy inside. And we could all use some more warm and fuzzy.
That's not a bad failure.
Right. It's an amazing thing.
I know.
Yeah.
Because I could hear all that and know how much insulin I would take for that meal.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm still figuring out what it would take for Mason's meal for that. And it is like a little science experiment where I see what I'm doing and then trying it again next time differently. And it's great when it works. And then I learn when it doesn't.
Yep. You just did. That's it. Just, again, they're not mistakes. They're experiences. And you just learn next time. I called it a mistake this time because I, from past experiences, saw what was going to happen and I didn't have the bandwidth to handle it at that moment. And so something gave, and that's what gave. But still, that's a miss. And a miss, I hear people sometimes, because I will share Arden's A1C. Arden's A1C right now is 5.4. And
that's fantastic.
And I think people think that means her blood sugar is 85 constantly.
No.
They don't realize if Arden's blood sugar was 85 constantly, her A1C would be like 4.6 or something like that. And so it's not, just because she went up to 140 for what's going to end up being an hour is not a big deal. If I ate something with a lot of carbs in it, my blood sugar would probably go up to 140 for an hour. So it's not the end of the world.
Right.
As long as it doesn't stay there or go higher and it comes back. Perfection's not the goal. I've never once had a goal of perfection. My goal is easy life, not think about diabetes very often, stay fluid, address insulin when it needs to be addressed. And other than that, I don't really think about it very often. I'm thinking about it now because you and I are talking about it.
Right.
But even if we weren't, I would just think, okay, I bolused this extra unit. This is the amount of time. Plus, you don't know. This is the last day of her pump. It expires in a couple of hours. She's got a little bit of she has a little bit of a head cold. There's a lot going on, And by the way, as you're trying to figure Mason out, they grow. I don't know if anyone, you probably know this, because you're a nurse, but they get bigger and they get taller. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
And every time it happens, they need more insulin.
Yeah, he gained 15 pounds this year.
Yeah, right. But a light doesn't go off on their head or something, so Like there's no bell in the background that goes ding, 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 and you go, oh, we have to move up our insulin by 30%. It's just, you just have to. I always when I find myself looking at her thinking she looks bigger, I don't. Then the next thing I think is, have I been seeing blood sugars that are acting the way I expect them to? Because if not, she probably needs more insulin now. It's really quite a ride. At least you don't have periods. That'll be a good thing.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
That didn't ever impact your life?
No, not that I just didn't even, no one ever said that. And the information I was getting was little. I got little information, and we didn't have social media. I wasn't reading on diabetes blogs or Instagram at that time. So I just didn't know these things. And there was a lot of things I had never heard of. And that was one of them. I never noticed that. And I didn't know that was a thing.
So here's why that's amazing. I'm glad that came up. Here you are, again, like an island unto yourself. You're not really touching anybody else that has diabetes. And you're living a life where you're fluid with your insulin. You're giving yourself insulin when you need insulin. You have an expectation of a blood sugar, and you're trying to keep yourself within it, right?
Yes.
And so that when your needs increase, you just increase your insulin. You don't stop. You don't stop and think, oh, this is the thing I heard that guy talk about one time that happens. You don't do that. You just
no.
And that goes right to what I say on the podcast, right? When your blood sugar is high, stop wondering what's happening and give yourself more insulin. Because it doesn't sort of in the moment matter what's happening. What matters is your blood sugar is trying to go higher. And why is your blood sugar high? Because you don't have enough insulin. It's the same reason as why is your blood sugar low? You have too much insulin. You've mistimed it. There's not enough combination of those two ideas. That's the same for high or low. And so you were just doing that and not thinking about the others.
Yes.
So that's such a good lesson for everyone. Is everyone listening? That's amazing. That's got to be your takeaway from this episode. It doesn't mean don't listen to the last 15 minutes, but that has to be your takeaway from this episode, which is that look what it was working for Leah the whole time, and she didn't even really know she was doing it. It was just I guess you didn't want to go back to the hospital since you were 16, right? that was a big thing, but I figured out how to do it, and I didn't rely on my doctor to figure it out for me. Mm-hmm. If I needed to stack, I stacked. If they told me not to, I just said okay and walked out and did my thing. And it was working, so they didn't question me. I'd go in, they'd say, "Oh, looks good. Keep doing what you're doing." And I did all my appointments. I did all my labs. I had my eyes checked, my feet checked, when I was supposed to. And yep, it worked. So that was that. I am getting to the point now with Arden's endo appointments where I hate to say this, and I don't vocalize it to her or anywhere else, but I'm starting to feel like they're a waste of our time mostly.
Do you go every 3 months?
I do, and I'm starting to think
I was going to ask my son's endocrinologist if we could switch to every 6 months at some point, because we're doing our A1Cs there, but I'm making the changes on his pump. They look at it, he's within range, his deviation is great. So if he keeps going, I don't see why we would. At some point I may question them about it.
I'm even wondering if it can't be ever just 4 months and just go 3 times a year. Because the last couple times I'm sitting there and they're like, "Hey, she looks good." And Arden's like, "Thanks." And, she's bored. Last time Arden brought her friends with her. There was like a room full of girls. I don't know if you saw that picture.
Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah, and so
that's adorable.
She's just like, "Come on, it's boring. Come with me." And so they all went with her. But 5 minutes into it, once, "Hey, your A1C's back. It's 5.4. Yay." Even at that, I'm like, okay, well, I already have the Clarity app. I kind of knew what it was going to be to begin with. And, and I'm like, all right. And then she starts asking me questions about stuff. "Have you heard about this pump thing?" And I'm like, wait a minute, I'm paying you. Yeah. Like, are you going to give me $40? Then, because I had to give you $40 to come in here. And,
right.
And then, there's a bill later. And I'm like, I'm spending, even it's minimal. We have really good insurance. I'm not going to lie to you. But I still spend $500 or $600 a year just to go to those appointments. And apparently what comes from them is the doctor asks me questions about diabetes. So
yeah. I had a similar situation at work last week. I was meeting with the diabetes educators at the hospital to do an in-service in my unit. And I asked them about VS because it wasn't in our medication administration charting. And they said, "What is that?" I was like, well, I'm learning all this stuff from a podcast and on Instagram. So,
leave me alone and get on Instagram, maybe.
Yeah. Let's step it up a little bit, but it's moving fast. And I don't know. It just seems like it's moving very fast.
This is going to be, I think, a breakneck time because
T-Slim
just came out with their, what do they call that? Basal IQ, which is, I guess, basically low glucose suspend, right? Mm-hmm. And Dexcom stuff is hammering along, and I just saw one of their financial reports. They're finally making money, so I can't wait to see what they do in R&D now that they have more money to spend. And so that's moving along. I may or may not know what Omnipod is doing, but they're hammering along very quickly with what they're trying to accomplish with their artificial pancreas and the Horizon system that's coming out, as soon as they can get it out.
It's so exciting. And I love how you say it's like the baby stages of it all. That's what's
barely started. Yeah, it really has. Yeah. You can't even count regular and NPH and your meter that took a half a gallon of blood to give you a reasonably inaccurate accounting of your blood sugar. That was before the sun came up. Like, don't even worry about that.
Right.
Like, we're talking about in the last I don't know, 7-ish years when Dexcom first started to release their products, and then that next one that came out, the accuracy picked up, and then the accuracy leaped, and it leaped again, and that we're right there. Like, something's about to happen, you know, and I'm heartened for me. Like, I'm not one of those people who's like, they're going to cure it. I don't think they're going to cure it. Not in my kid's lifetime. The part I'm excited about is automation before she goes to college. Like, that really is my, like, horizon goal. Like, you know, for me. And I mean that figuratively, literally. That is my off in the horizon thought. And it is my hope for the Horizon system when Omnipod releases it. Because I just watched my son go to college for the first time last month.
Oh my gosh.
You know, as a freshman. And he is incredibly fit, incredibly athletic, bright, on the baseball team at his college, doesn't drink, he's a fairly together person. And some people might be laughing right now going, oh, that funny man thinks his kid's not drinking at college. My son called me 2 weeks into college to tell me that guys on his team pulled him aside privately and said how impressive they thought it was that he doesn't drink.
Oh,
and so
that's wonderful.
And even in that, thank you. Even in that, he got a head cold, a pretty bad head cold in his second week, and it almost killed him because he wouldn't give up on classes. He wasn't going to give up on baseball, but he lost like 8 pounds in a week. He was just,
wow.
He'd come up on FaceTime. And I said, my wife was like, he doesn't look good. And I was like, no, I've been talking to him. I shipped him medicine. I sent him to the wellness center. And if he was managing diabetes by himself, really by himself for the first time in his life, and all of that happened at once, I can't even imagine. When you say something's got to give, it's the diabetes that gives. You say to yourself, well, I'm going to let my blood sugar be a little higher because I'm overwhelmed now. And I just think if that automation exists and it can buoy Arden in college, I just think, wow, imagine what it's going to do for younger people and older people who are not in as stressful of a situation every day. I think it's going to be amazing.
I'm excited. And my kids, they're 8 and 9, so they got a while to go before college, but it's exciting.
Yeah, but still, if you're using Omnipod and Dexcom now, and I don't know timelines, I really don't. But say less than 2 years from now, your Omnipod's talking to your Dexcom, and you're telling a little thing on your phone, hey, I just had a big meal. Or it figures out at 3 o'clock in the morning that you're going to be low 10, 20, 30, 40 minutes from now. Just imagine what an incredible leap that is. And then that's not the exciting part. The exciting part is you went from Dexcom G7, or 7 Plus, not G7, but 7 Plus, 7, 8 years ago, to this less than a decade later. Imagine 5 years after that. I can't even imagine what's going to come 5 years after that. That's going to be the spot where, you're going to get disco ball lights and all the extra bells and whistles are going to come. It's going to be really something.
Yeah, I'm hoping I can get some sleep.
It's a reasonable goal, Leah, and I think you should stick to it.
Yeah.
So
I hope that the technology does it as well as I would do it, I guess. That's the only thing. It's
my selling point right there too, is that as long as, and I think the Medtronic's in that boat right now, it has a target goal of 120. I don't want automation that targets at 120. And so I understand if it has to, because it's so new. I don't not understand why Medtronic might have made that decision, but that's not as good as what we're experiencing. So I needed to do that. From all accounts, and I genuinely don't know anything, but I know that Omnipod is shooting for a user-defined
their own.
Yeah, blood sugar. And I don't know if, please, I don't know if that's going to happen or not. I just know that's their goal. So hopefully that ends up working out that way, because that's amazing. I want to dial that goal to 90 and see how that works. That
I can't wait.
Else. Yeah, even if it came close to that, it would be amazing.
Yeah.
So tell me something. We have 5 minutes left. See if we can fix something for you, right? Why are you not sleeping? Besides, you have 2 people with diabetes and you're one of them.
Yeah, it's just the alarms going off. Sometimes, so I'll keep his Dexcom set at 75 during school hours, and then I won't switch it back. And then at nighttime, if he's going under 75, it'll start beeping,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's good because then I can turn him off for a half hour. But then I'm kind of awake just to make sure that it's going the way I want it to go. Last night I was running high. My pod needed to get changed, and I was just too tired to do it. So I just kept trying to bolus myself, and then ended. I needed to change it. So I did that early this morning.
I hear you. It's so the answer is you have two people in your life that have diabetes, and one of them is you, and one of them's the person you love.
Yeah, and I always used to wake up at least once a night to test my blood sugar before my Dexcom. So that's not new, but it's once the Dexcom came and just trying to keep things in really great control overnight. And sometimes, he just starts going up. And so I'm staying up to bolus him until I get him where I want him to be overnight.
I have to say, ours are in spits and fits and spits, or fits and what is that saying? I don't know the saying. Fits and spurts, maybe. I don't know. I don't have the internet in front of me right now. But anyway, it's so last night, blood sugar, great all night. Been like that for 3 days. At some point last week, there were 3 days where I was she wanted to be low all the time. And, and there's been times this month where she wanted to be higher. And I sleep through some of them. And, obviously these real steady nights are easy to sleep through. The low nights, I'm not as good as just ignoring them and going back to sleep. The high nights, I'm okay with bolusing, going back to sleep and waking up again. And so, it's just, again, it's diabetes. You can't expect it to always be, it's not always an 85 blood sugar. It doesn't matter how good your A1C is.
Absolutely.
And some people might say, well, I'm comfortable with a blood sugar higher than that overnight. And I even make that decision at some point. I was sick a couple weeks ago, and Arden's blood sugar was sitting at 140. And I thought to myself, I have to go to sleep. I can't do this right now. So I just let her blood sugar be 140 overnight. I did my best for it not to be, and I went to sleep. You have to take care of yourself too at some point. Leah, thank you. How did this go for you?
Thank
How
you,
did you
Scott. Feel? It was great. I was a little nervous, but it was exciting too. And it's nice to be able to talk about diabetes. And now, I talk about it a lot now, and I never did before. So it's pretty great. It's made things better.
Well, I think you guys are very lucky to have each other, obviously. I think he's helped you a lot in ways that you're still probably figuring out, and you're obviously, helping him in immense ways. So, and your husband's telling you all the right stuff, that you just won't listen to him.
I try to.
Which, by the way, I assume my wife would say you were right to do. And to continue to ignore that man because he does not have your best interest at heart, even though he probably does. And it's just fun to think he doesn't for some reason. I don't know why you women hate us. That's a blanket statement, but there's at least once a day I think to myself, if that woman wants to kill me, why doesn't she just smother me with a pillow? Why is it taking so long? You know what I mean? Why is she just picking away at me super, super slow? Why not just do it? I'm going to tell a funny story, and then I'm going to let you go. There's these people I don't really know very well from the town I live in. It's to say that over the years, our kids have played similar sports, and we've been next to each other in horrible situations in gymnasiums and baseball fields once or twice. And this person tells me what I still consider to be one of the funniest stories, which I'm going to tell you over Basil snoring in the background right now. She said that one night she woke up, and her husband was standing next to the bed holding a pillow. And now keep in mind, he just needed an extra pillow. He went to a rocking chair in the corner to get an extra pillow. But she opened her eyes. Her husband was standing there with a pillow. And she said her first thought was, and I can't curse in the podcast, her first thought was, I was going to kill him. She said there was a split second where she thought, He got to it first. He got to it first, and she said that was exactly what she thought, the F word. I was going to kill him. And then she was giving up in that moment. She thought, oh, well, he beat me to it. Fair's fair. And they've been married for a very long time.
You can tell.
I don't know what I would do if my first thought when I saw my wife moving through the room was, oh, God, she's going to kill me. But
that's not a good sign.
I don't think it's a great sign at all, but it's a funny, funny story. So just try to imagine it with the cursing. It's really hilarious. Anyway, that's the big secret I tell anybody. If you ever speak to me in private, the first thing you're going to realize is that my ability not to curse on this podcast is a monumental experience on my end because I love to curse. And so that I don't do it in this hour a number of times a week sometimes, it's hard to believe, actually. So I was on a call the other day with one of the companies who buys ads on the podcast, and my wife was working from home, and she goes, well done, you only cursed twice in a half an hour on a business call. I'm like, they know to expect it. It's fine. Anyway, please say hello to your son for me and your whole family, and thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you so much. I really appreciate everything you do, and you're doing amazing work, and it's definitely has affected us and helped us. So we appreciate it, and thank you.
Those sentiments mean a lot to me, so I very much appreciate you sharing them. Thank you very much. Huge thanks to Leah for coming on the show, sharing her life with type 1 as well as her son's. And if you're enjoying the program, if you like the podcast, please keep in mind it's here because of the sponsors. And then you check them out. You click on the links in the show notes and you look at them. You say, hey, maybe Scott's onto something here. And that helps everything. You know what I mean by helps? The podcast is free because of the ads. You got to visit the sponsors. myomnipod.com/juicebox. Dexcom.com/juicebox. You go to realgoodfoods.com, use the offer code juicebox, and you save 20% on your order. And then once you've got your insulin pump and your CGM and you're all happy and you've seen the pictures of the little kids with diabetes dancing at dancingfordiabetes.com, you make yourself some cauliflower crust pizza and some chicken poppers and you sit back and relax. And you say to yourself, this has been a good day. And just a quick note about the episodes that I mentioned at the beginning of this episode. The ones that are going to be with Jenny Smith, the certified diabetes educator who's been on the program a number of times before. Those episodes are going to come out in blocks. Sometimes there'll be 2 or 3 at a time. So when you see one, check back to make sure you got them all. Now, they're not going to be as long as the other episodes in the podcast, the interview style episodes. They're going to be more, some of them will be 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever it takes for Jenny and I to go over specific management ideas in very complete ways. Jenny and I have been having a terrific time recording these episodes. I cannot wait to get them onto your podcast player and into your ears. I think you're going to love them.